Welcome to Season 3, Episode 4 of The Exchange, a coffee podcast where coffee people talk to coffee people about coffee and or things coffee adjacent. I'm Mike Ferguson. For this episode, we'll be talking about coffee origin issues. Note that our guest is calling all the way from Guatemala, and at times you can hear the gremlins playing jump rope with the telephone lines, so I apologize if the sound quality is a little challenging here and there. Today, our guest is
Byron Holcomb. My first job in coffee was that of a Peace Corps volunteer in the Dominican Republic. I was there for 2 years, working in a remote community called Los Frios. From there, I came back to the U.S., where I kind of realized that I wanted to work in coffee as a career. And so I got a job at Batdorf & Bronson, sweeping the floor as it was offered to me, and as a production assistant. Later worked in retail, later became a roasted bean sales rep for counterculture coffee. And then from there, I went on to do some consulting for a little while. And in 2007, I purchased my own little coffee farm in the Dominican Republic, 5 hectares, where I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And so I knew the community, I knew the region, wanted to bring specialty coffee to that region, and kind of kept it going as a cell phone farmer from the U.S. Learned a lot about processing through that experience. And then I became a coffee buyer at Dallas Brothers Coffee in New York City from 2010, I believe, to 2013. In 2013, I was given the opportunity to move to Brazil and run 2 medium-sized specialty farms for a multinational. That company today is known as Noble Tree Coffee in New York City. And then in 2019, I moved to become the regional specialty manager for Olam in Guatemala. I'm based in Guatemala, and I work with a few different origins that we have operations in, like Mexico, Honduras, Peru, and Colombia, to support the specialty business.
And that's what you're doing now?
And that's what I do now, yeah. I'm currently in Guatemala City.
And so how long in coffee total?
So if you count my Peace Corps years, when I did work with, agroforestry stuff and, tree nurseries with avocado and coffee and lime, that was 2003. And so 2003 until now. So I guess that's quite a few years.
Yeah, coming up on 20.
That's crazy, yeah.
So in your current role, just to get some idea of what you do, what's the day in the life like for you these days?
It's nice because every day is different. Usually I get up pretty early because my daughter goes to school at 6:30, so we have to get her on the bus. But from there, it's usually a combination of either field trips or days in the office with lots of meetings and follow-ups, and where I kind of have 2 focuses. One is, of course, trading coffee. So if, Todd Mackey calls me and says, "Hey, Byron, I want a container of Jabiru," or "Hey, what's up in Mexico right now? I wanted this kind of supply." And so there's coffee trading. So that's kind of a constant, back and forth, negotiating with traders and farmers. And then the other part is kind of more the administrative side of managing operations and different origins as well as Guatemala. And so that's where you get lots of meetings and lots of spreadsheets and lots of reports to review. There's definitely time in the field, and that's always nice to go out and visit farms and visit our own cherry mill in Ayarza, visit our operations in Huehuetenango. Not every day, but, definitely part of what I do. And then, outside of work, I ride my bike a lot, and, my wife and daughter are here, and we have a normal family life with friends, and that's about it.
Yeah, there's some things that you get to do that might be unique compared to other specialty coffee managers. There's some things around innovation in processing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And with some of the kind of the approach from Olam to really try to find opportunities for adding flavor, for adding value to a coffee, we've done a lot with innovation. And so we have this incredible food scientist named Siva. And he and I have collaborated quite a bit to create the processing PDF, the kind of the flow chart that classifies all the different types of processing into one document. In Mexico, we've done with starter culture. We've improved cup quality in both washed and natural processed coffees. Those are really exciting because you're taking a pretty, you could say, normal coffee, kind of a normal SHG Mexico, and then you've made it a really kind of fantastic specialty offer. Also in Peru, we're working on cascara, and so some of that is starting to yield fruit, as you could say. I mean, those products are coming to market now as well. And then here in Guatemala, you could call it innovation, but it's when I first came here in 2019, when we saw that we had a cherry mill and we wanted to do some specialty processes, we started doing naturals and honeys, and now we're doing carbonic maceration here in Guatemala. And the farmers and the people around me said, "You can't do that. This is Guatemala. You can't put that. That process doesn't work." And then, 3 or 4 years later, we're selling several containers of it, and it's really good coffee, and it's working. And so innovation has been, for me, I'd almost call it a passion project. I would do that if it wasn't even part of my job, because it's just really exciting to add value, add flavor to coffee.
For some of our listeners are new to coffee, just starting out, could you explain what cascara is?
Sure. Cascara is when you take a coffee cherry, as you know, it's the cherry on a tree, the bean is inside it. And so when you depulp that, you've removed the skin, and a little bit of fruit kind of goes with the skin when you depulp it to make a washed coffee. And so when you've separated that bean from the cherry skin, that cherry skin in Spanish is called cascara. And so that skin or peel, when you dry it properly, you can make tea out of it. And that's actually, it's kind of one of the original coffee products from Yemen, is they actually, and I think today, if I'm not mistaken, they call it Kirsch. I'm not exactly sure the name. But they still drink it, and it's kind of a tannic, caffeinated, tea beverage that you can make from coffee that's not coffee.
What are some of the other things we're doing with the cascara? I know tea is sort of the traditional use.
There's tea, there's cascara flour, there's other kind of energetic extracts from it. I mean, one of the, especially for those people who are new to coffee, caffeine is, we, of course, in small doses drink it and enjoy the benefits of being able to wake up in the morning. But for an insect, that's a pretty kind of bitter, poison. And so I think from that perspective, the whole coffee tree has a lot of potential. I mean, you can make tea out of the leaves. I remember from my coffee farmer friends in the Dominican Republic, when they would tell me they would go out and travel to visit their farm, and they would forget the coffee, they would actually make coffee tea out of the leaves of the tree so they wouldn't have a headache in the morning. It's
exciting because just in terms of net waste, finding uses for the cascara cuts down so much.
Absolutely. And also, if you look at the carbon footprint of coffee, a large percentage of that carbon footprint, probably 30%, maybe more, is actually from the crop residue management. And so that you're managing your waste products, your wastewater, your cascara. And so if we can find uses for that, it has a kind of an amplifying effect in the sense that you've decreased the carbon footprint of the coffee, you've added value to that coffee, and you've also decreased the waste.
So bigger picture, first on Guatemala, which is your primary concern, you're involved with other origins as well. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing for Guatemala specifically, which is a favorite specialty origin for a lot of roasters, but other origins as well in general throughout Central and South America? And then some of the success stories, what things are working right now?
The biggest concern or the biggest challenge, you could say, that both Guatemala and especially Guatemala and Honduras are facing is basically migration. There's fewer pickers, and coffee is incredibly labor intensive, right? It's not the kind of thing where it's, you visit the farm a couple times a year and you go in there and pick it. No, it's like you have to do the pruning, you have to do the weeding, you have to fertilize, you have to pick. And the biggest impact that we see during the crop year or the crop cycle is during harvest, you need a ton of pickers, like lots and lots and lots of people to pick coffee well. And this last crop, what we've seen is that there are fewer pickers, right? A lot of people are just not there. And so these pickers so the farm owners are having to do more with less people. I've heard of coffee farms not being even able to finish their harvest because they just couldn't get people to the trees in time. That's a pretty big challenge. I mean, the other challenge that I hear and see in the field is just fertilizer cost increase. It's gone up 100%. It's twofold. Yeah. And so again, coffee is an agricultural crop. No food, no harvest, right? And so if you really start to pull back on your fertilizer applications because it's so much more expensive now, you might not see it immediately, but over the next couple of years, you'll see a pretty drastic decrease in your production. Mm-hmm. And so those are the two, it's not a perfect storm quite yet, but it's getting there. Lack of labor and fertilizer cost increase are those are the biggest cost elements in your cost of production. It's tough. These are definitely choppy waters, I would say.
Sort of on the other side of the coin, success stories maybe in the midst of all these challenges.
For sure. I think, some of the success stories are things like, on the other side of that labor equation, if you look at who is now running the farms, a lot of these are women who have, their husbands have left and gone to the U.S. and the women are there producing coffee, and they're part of the program called Cafetelas. So this is a regional LATAM product that started in Brazil, and now we've brought it to the whole region. And so we have women producers who are producing fine coffee, receiving trainings from us. And then, some of the best lots of those are being sold to, people like you in the U.S. and others that are keen to support the program. And so that's definitely, I think, a huge success story. The other is some of these kind of digital initiatives that we've been rolling out, especially in Guatemala, called Olam Direct, which is where we're able to have full farmer traceability in regions where that's usually pretty difficult. Yeah. And so if you look at a region like Huehuetenango, lots of smallholders selling in dry parchment, it's hard to find, really fantastic lots that are farmer traceable. And yet we're able to offer, tiny lots like the Jorge Luis Sanchez lot that we just sold to your team, Mike. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful coffee. It comes from a small region called Santa Barbara in Huehuetenango. It's not very well known. He has this incredible system where he raises he produces peach as kind of the shade tree and then coffee below it. And so he's always harvesting one or the other. It's really, and it's through programs like Olam Direct that we can discover these kind of these micro lots that are both really tasty and really exciting.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by Olam Direct. Can you talk about what Olam Direct looks like on the ground, just logistically in very practical terms, what that program looks like? For
a farmer, they have their needs when the harvest comes in. They've been spending money and investing in their crop the whole year. And maybe it's not their only product, right? Maybe they have broccoli or cabbage. Especially in Huehue, there are regions that the farmer can do both, like cabbage or broccoli or sweet peas or snow peas and coffee. But, in the coffee crop, they've been investing all year long, and then the harvest comes in and they need to sell it, right? Mm-hmm. And so you want a healthy market. You want the farmer to have options, but you also want the farmer to have a certain level of market intelligence.
Right.
And so that market intelligence comes from a real price from a real buyer, right? Not just these intermediaries who happen to have a pickup truck and are paying the same price for all different for different qualities and trying to blend coffee to make their money. With Olam Direct, it's a simple system, right? And so we have small farmers who are like leaders in their communities buying coffee from their neighbors, and it's completely price transparent. And I think for me, that's one of the most powerful elements. So the small farmer, who is this guy's neighbor, gets to see the price as well as the guy who's buying the coffee. So he's kind of like our mini kind of receiving agent. And so he'll receive the coffee in his house. When he has, a truckload or a pickup load, he'll deliver it to us. We double check the quality, and we provide the capital, we provide the digital infrastructure, we provide the tools. So that farmer who's receiving the coffee, we call him a farmer leader. He actually does the analysis on the coffee. And if the coffee is better than expected, then the farmer immediately gets a premium paid to him or her. And so it's an immediate feedback loop. It's, farmer prices that are real. Because I think, when you spend a lot of time at origin and you tell a farmer like, hey, the C market is $2.30, he says, what does that mean to me? I don't buy in dollars. I buy my food in quetzales or Colombian pesos or Mexican pesos, mm-hmm. And so he needs to know what that's relevant to him in. And he doesn't buy it, or he doesn't sell something to the board in New York, right? So it's a fee market plus a differential, that's quality involved. And so when he receives every single morning a price for his coffee or her coffee, that's really empowering. It's like, oh, okay, I like the price today, I'll sell. I don't like the price today, I'm going to wait. I mean, that's really cool.
At the level of the farmer, that transparency happens with smartphones, right?
Correct, but it doesn't have to be like the farmer leader has to have a smartphone, right? Because he has to have the Olam Direct app, and he has to upload all of the details of the farmer, of the quality. But the farmer, the term here we use for the little cell phones, like the little old Nokias, that don't have they're not smartphones. They call them frijolitos, which means like little beans, because they look like, little beans, right? And so those phones receive text messages all over the country. And so we send out thousands of text messages a day during harvest, giving prices out to everybody, right? And so I think that's a pretty, so you don't have to have a smartphone, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Sort of beyond coffee quality, what are some of the origin issues that you're either observing or involved with that don't necessarily have anything to do directly with the physical coffee itself, but that you and or us as an organization are involved with?
Sure. I get very involved in sustainability efforts. In Guatemala, I'm heavily involved with a few different projects. One is the reduction of carbon footprint of the coffee through doing soil analyses and providing fertilizer to farmers. There's a water reduction project with larger farmers to reduce the water consumption in their wet mills, where we've shown up to like 80% reduction in the water usage, which is pretty significant. And then there's also, we also have some very large kind of multi-year projects. One of them is called MOCA, which is a combination of funding from USDA and TechnoServe and MOCA, and we're one of their bigger partners here in Guatemala in Huehuetenango, providing training to over almost 5,000 farmers in a 3-year cycle, right? And so it's like training literally from like how you plant a seed to how you pick the coffee, to how you wash the coffee, to how you treat your farm like a little business, how do you prune the coffee when that time comes. That's pretty powerful to see, when you have 18 agronomists in the field every single day giving out trainings. The amount of trainings and support we can give to farmers is pretty incredible. And then there's also a lot of small projects that I end up doing, through support from some of our specialty offices, like the ones in Europe, like you guys in the U.S. We've done some really cool projects. We lots of small pilots, I would say. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that means a methanogenic processing bladder to produce methane, and also process some of the wastewater in our cherry mill, which has been very successful. We have done water filter distribution in Atitlan for that coffee chochuhao, which the U.S. team sells quite a bit of. We were able to take we were able to support that community and provide some water filters and also saplings. So we bought the seeds and we bought the bags, and then they did the manual labor on kind of filling the bags and preparing the saplings. There's just lots of these really small, very cool projects that we're using to try to have a very targeted impact. On Friday, we're going to a school in Ayarza near our cherry mill, mm-hmm. where we can, where we're inaugurating a kitchen, right? So this school had expressed the need to us that they want a better kitchen because with 330 students and this tiny little footprint, I mean, this kitchen was like, there's no way you could prepare food for 330 students in this kitchen. And so they made a budget. The fathers, the parents of the kids did all the labor, 100% of the labor, all of the cement mixing, the pouring, tying up the rebar, everything. And then we had a roaster partner who wanted to fund it. And so he supported the kitchen, right? Mm-hmm. And so on Friday, they've invited us to go have the first meal in the kitchen, right? And we're providing a much better environment for these kids to have good food. I mean, mm-hmm. that's just super cool. And so right. I get, those for me are like some of these like different passion projects that have very targeted impacts in sustainability, but we also have a huge project, like I said, 3-year program with Mocha.
A lot of our listeners are, as I've said, new coffee buyers. A lot of them have never been to Origin, but hope to go one day. What's some advice you have to a green coffee buyer / roaster who's on their first trip to Origin?
Great question. And honestly, like I've had a lot of visitors over the years in Origin. Between my time in Brazil, I was a coffee buyer, so I've been kind of that coffee buyer visiting Origin, and also here in Guatemala and in other countries. My advice for the first-time buyer is like, you are there to learn. You are there not to show what you know, but you're there to understand that coffee in that context. Every coffee origin is its own island. I like to say it's its own island. And when I say that, I mean it's its own language. It's in terms of how they talk about coffee. It's its own challenges in terms of labor, in terms of what are the different diseases that are affecting the coffee, the climate, how that coffee is traded. And so you're there to try to understand that coffee in that context. And you can only do that if you show up and start asking a lot of questions, and questions that you probably know the answer to. I always tell first-time buyers, I'm like, yeah, you know what fermented coffee is, but ask them how they ferment. Ask them how they dry their coffee. Yeah, you can see the coffee on the patio, but like, ask them what is their process? How do they wash the coffee? How do they get it clean? How do they transport it? Is it mule? Is it a truck? Is it on their back? I mean, we've seen everything. Sometimes it's a tractor, sometimes it's a mule, sometimes it's on somebody's back, sometimes it's on a motorcycle. I mean, the coffee moves in all kinds of ways. And so as your first time buyer, it's really important just to ask a ton of questions. You're not there to tell a farmer how to farm coffee. You're there to ask those questions and build that relationship, right? Yeah.
I think whether it's your first time at Origin or your 15th time or your 50th time, you can't lose by approaching that trip with a beginner's mind.
I completely agree.
You've been around and observing the coffee industry now for almost 20 years. When it comes to green coffee buyers, what are some of the things that successful green coffee buyers have in common?
Good question. I mean, how do you define a successful green coffee buyer? That's a great question. I think what I see in common in the companies and in the green buyers that I've met that kind of like that do kind of like impress me, or I can see that that company's been around for as long as I have in coffee or something. They're all about the numbers, right? They know exactly how many bags of what quality they need to buy, and they're very disciplined. Mm-hmm. I think part one is they know their numbers. Part two is they're disciplined in their buying, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I need to buy a micro lot. Oh, this micro lot, 15 bags. Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. But you only need 10. Right. So don't buy 15. Mm-hmm. And so you have to have that discipline to be like, it's not a micro lot when it's been sitting in my inventory for 2 years because I couldn't sell it. Mm-hmm. So like maybe I only need to buy 10. And so it's that discipline and knowing your numbers is what I see as separating some of these kind of more successful companies and green buyers than the people who are kind of maybe not quite as number savvy and they just show up and kind of follow their heart, because it's a business at the end of the day.
Right.
You got to follow. You got to know your numbers.
Yeah. Not to answer my own question, but the most successful green buyers that I know are just as comfortable with a spreadsheet as they are at the cupping table.
Absolutely.
The other thing is that I tend to find is when green coffee is pulling up to the dock, no matter how long they've been a buyer or a roaster, they're still excited to go meet that coffee on the dock. If you're so burnt out that you're not interested in what's coming in, it might be time to refresh.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, any kind of business, and I think coffee in particular, it's a marathon. Generally speaking, you could see like 3 or 4 years of bad years for the farmer with a low seed market, and now you're seeing better years for the farmer with a higher seed market. Of course, challenges with labor and fertilizer, but these are hard years for a roaster. I mean, I remember in 2010 when I became a coffee buyer, the first purchase I made was a seed market level of 168.
Yeah.
And then the market rallied to 280, 290. It even broke $3.
Yeah.
And when you're a roaster and you're looking at your numbers in your spreadsheet, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if we can make it. And so again, it's just like you said, you've got to be disciplined, but you've also got to keep it's a meaningful business.
Yeah.
I mean, you're dealing with some of the most remote, and sometimes even the poorest and, difficult places to reach in the world, and you're able to serve their products.
Right.
That's just super cool.
Okay. So as we're coming to a close, my last question is, if you could go back in time to 2003 and talk to Byron, who's just started, sweeping the floor at Batdorf and Bronson, let's say, what would be your advice to that Byron?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I hate to go back and just repeat what I just said, but I think it's again kind of a focus on the numbers. Mm-hmm. And I think the only other thing I would kind of focus on, and this might sound kind of dry and stale, but the focus on the sales. Mm-hmm. Really what's going to keep any kind of business going is focusing on the sales. And I think, when I look back at my roaster days and I see that, we have the days that you're waking up at 4:30 in the morning and you're getting to the roastery at 5:30 and you're weighing green and roasting 18, 20, 25 batches. Like, okay, you're using the capacity in your roaster. Mm-hmm. But if you all of a sudden start having days where you're like, okay, I can roll in at 7, I don't have to do very many roasts today. You need to start looking at your sales, because it's like, it's in a lot of ways, it's kind of easy to buy coffee. You can get coffee in your warehouse, but getting it out is the point.
Right.
When you can turn it over and give your employees, health insurance and support them and support your farmers more. That's not coming from really the buying side.
Right.
Of course, that's important, but you've got to sell it. And I would say, I would go back to the Byron 20 years ago and say, hey man, you need to know how to sell.
Yeah.
And that's really what keeps everything afloat. It's not the cost going out, it's the invoices that you're sending out and collecting.
Yeah. Coffee's like anything else. Production minus sales equals scrap.
Exactly. And there's a lot of scrap in coffee. I mean, how much, roasters that are committed to quality. I mean, how many hundreds of pounds are they turning out at the end of, on Sunday when it timed out?
Yeah.
There's a lot of scrap. And so there's opportunities there to optimize. But you can't optimize more than great sales and great service and serving your customers. I mean, you don't get sales just by like knocking on doors and being obnoxious. You get it by serving your customers.
Right.
And I think that's the trick, is know your customers, serve your customers, make those sales and deliver on it. It's no different for me, as a trader sitting at Origin and trying to support both the farmers, but also my clients. I try to provide service to both.
Well, Byron, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us today.
Sure thing, Mike. Great talking to you as always.
Okay. Take care.
Cheers.
You've been listening to The Exchange, coming to you from our coffee podcast studio in beautiful downtown Providence, Rhode Island. The Exchange is produced and edited by me, Mike Ferguson. Our opening theme was A Cup of Coffee and a Piece of Pie by the Ribeye Brothers. Our closing theme is Coffee Morning by Olga Scotland. All music is used under Creative Commons. You can reach us now using electronic mail on a computer at coffeetheexchange@gmail.com. And now, your postscript.
My name is Ding Dong. I work in the wine industry, and I have 4 legs.